at a certain point, we need to take responsibility for our equivalent of jihadists. There's now a stream of Jewish jihadists. And I would always, in the past, be very careful about using these terms. But something basic has changed in the last couple of years.
Today is Monday, April 6th. This is Boundless Insights, and I'm Aviva Klompas. Right now, most of the conversation about the Middle East is centered on the war with Iran, on strategy, escalation, and what may happen next. But there's another reality taking shape at the same time, and it's one that's harder to talk about. Attacks by Jewish extremists against Palestinians in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria have been on the rise. We're talking about violent assaults, arson, destruction of property, and efforts to take over land, affecting more than 100 Palestinian towns and villages. This isn't just a question of isolated incidents. It's something that forces a broader reckoning. Because when this kind of violence persists, the issue isn't only who's carrying it out, it's whether it's being confronted and what that says about the system around it. And that leads to a deeper question: the kind of society Israel is striving to be, even or especially under the pressure of a long and exhausting war. Joining me today is Yossi Klein Halevi, a senior fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem and the author of Like Dreamers and Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor. He's someone who has spent years thinking seriously about Israel's identity, about its values, its responsibilities, and the tensions that come with trying to hold all of that together. Let's get into it. Yossi, welcome back to Boundless Insights.
Oh, great to be back with you.
An enormous honor. And as we were saying just before we started to record, it feels difficult to have this particular conversation at this time because it feels a little bit like you're beating up on your own team while your own team is down in the dirt. But it feels like an important conversation for us to talk about settler or extremist violence today.
Yeah, I don't feel that they're on my team or I'm on their team.
I meant beating up a little bit on Israel while it's going through a tough period.
Right. But I think it's an important distinction because the violence, the gratuitous violence that part of the settlement movement either actively engages in or tacitly accepts is, I think, one of the great strategic long-term threats to Israel.
When people talk about settler violence, that can mean very different things to different people. So how do you actually define settler violence? And can you give us a sense of just how widespread the issue is?
Yeah, so I used to be very strict with my definition and insist on speaking about the violent settlers as a fringe. And since the rise of Smotrich and Ben Gvir to key positions of power in the Israeli government, I no longer speak about the phenomenon as fringe. The radical settlers now have patrons sitting in the most sensitive places in government. And the ongoing silence of most of the settler community, most of the rabbis, there have been a few who have condemned the violence, very few. The ongoing silence of the settlement political leadership has really forced me into a reevaluation. And I think that we can't hide behind the formulation that Netanyahu just recently said, which is it's just a handful of misfits, a few dozen misfits. It's not a few dozen anymore. It's hundreds. And they're misfits in the sense that part of the Israeli government are misfits. And at what point do you stop being misfits if you're part of the political establishment?
So because they're small in number, it doesn't matter because they're essentially backed by well-placed, powerful government ministers that are providing a layer of protection for them.
Yes, and I do think their numbers are growing, and I think that more to the point, the numbers of their sympathizers are growing. they're no longer outliers in the way they once were. And at a certain point, we need to take responsibility for our equivalent of jihadists. There's now a stream of Jewish jihadists, and I would always in the past be very careful about using these terms, but something basic has changed in the last couple of years, and the fact that the army is helpless or is being prevented from acting by the government. The police seem to have no inclination to get involved, and that's certainly, I think, a direct result of the transformations that Ben Gvir has brought into the Israeli police. Then we're in a new reality, and to continue pretending that this is a fringe phenomenon is to evade the responsibility that we have as Zionists, as a sovereign Jewish state. Sovereignty imposes not only benefits but responsibilities, and part of those responsibilities are ensuring that we don't have independent militias arising in our midst. Naftali Bennett recently called the rioters, the extremist settlers, a phalange. And we know from Lebanon that once a society begins creating separate militias, you're on your way to losing your national authority. Our national authority is challenged in so many directions. We have the Bedouin in the south, who to some extent are a state within a state. We have the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, who function as a de facto state within a state. We have now part of the settlement movement that's functioning as a state within a state. If we don't begin reasserting the sovereignty, in Hebrew the word is mishilut, our ability to govern, then we're on our way to losing our national sovereignty.
I want to ask you about a couple of the things that you said. So first of all, you said that the extremists that are committing the violence are no longer seen as outliers. And I wanted to ask, by whom? Are you talking about by the rest of the settler community, or are you talking about the issue being minimized across Israel in general?
No, I think that most of the settlers don't approve of random violence, of mobs of young Jews roaming Palestinian villages and burning homes. But the question is, to what extent don't they disapprove? Where's the outcry? And this is being done in the name of the settlement movement. Where are the voices of the mainstream leadership saying, no, you don't represent us? And we, in fact, call on the army and the police to take control, because this is deeply destructive for the settlement movement, for the state of Israel, to say nothing of the moral credibility of the Jewish people. And we're not hearing those voices, at least not in any significant way. In terms of wider Israeli society, I think that there's been a gradual attrition in what many Israelis once regarded as morally unacceptable to what today is considered to be part of a legitimate war against terrorism. And again, certainly October 7th has played a role, but the process began long before October 7th. And I'm thinking of I believe it was in 2015, when an Israeli soldier stationed in Hebron, in the West Bank city of Hebron, named Elor Azaria, shot to death a terrorist who had been taken prisoner by the IDF. He was bound, and Elor Azaria shot him point blank. And much of the Israeli public sided with Elor Azaria against the army. The army put him on trial. Much of the public was against putting him on trial. What did he do? What did he do? He killed a terrorist. Isn't that what the army is supposed to do? Yes, but the moment that a terrorist is in your hands, there are rules. You know, this is a country that tried Adolf Eichmann, and until the moment that he was hanged, no one laid a finger on him. No one abused him. No one, as far as I can recall, even shouted at him, even during his trial, months-long trial. It was one of the most emotionally wrenching experiences in the history of the state. And yet, people here understood that as soon as even an Eichmann is taken prisoner, then the rule of law applies to him as well. And we're losing that. We're losing that in parts, that awareness, those moral red lines in parts of Israeli society. And you know, when we talk about moral red lines, it's certainly it's about our soul, the soul of Israel, but not only. It's also about our physical protection. Because if we lose whatever moral credibility this country has left, and we've lost so much already, much of it not our fault, some of it is our fault. But if we allow ourselves to become effectively a lawless society, then we're bringing the next level of disaster on ourselves.
What is it that you think changed on October 7th? Is it the idea that Israelis have a harder time now of seeing Palestinians as
innocent? Well, certainly the war, the extended war, is Israel's longest war, longer by now even than the 1948 war, which lasted for 2 years. October 7th and the subsequent war, which is nowhere near over, has certainly inevitably eroded certain standards, certain red lines in Israeli attitudes and also in our behavior. I think that the scenes that we saw on October 7th, and I don't mean only the massacre, I mean parading the dead and wounded bodies of Israeli women through the streets of Gaza City and the thousands of people cheering. And then the terrible scenes around the transference of the bodies of the Bibas children back to Israel.
Just to remind people, these were essentially street parties thrown by Hamas to celebrate the fact that they had held Jewish bodies, that they had held the body of a mother and 2 children, and they were celebrating and throwing glitter, and they had brought little children to watch this, and they're singing songs.
And they did this in the presence of the coffins of the Bibas children. And they turned it into a picnic, mass picnic celebration. And so these and other images have gone a long way to eroding the ability of many Israelis to make distinctions between combatants and innocents. And emotionally, I understand that. Of course I do. I think most Israeli Jews understand it. But we can't allow our emotions to begin to determine policy. And that, I think, is spilling over in part into the higher tolerance level for settler violence within the Israeli public. If we're at war with these people, if there are no innocent Palestinians, and you hear that a lot, you know, there are no innocent Palestinians. They're all Hamas. Then you're really opening the way to, at the very least, indulging the kind of violence that we see sometimes on a nightly basis in Judea and Samaria.
I'm going to take a side note and just ask you about your choice of terminology. When you sometimes say West Bank versus Judea and Samaria, do you have sort of guiding principles for when you use which terminology?
No, I understand the ideological minefield of the terminologies. Generally, it's occupation. It's and there's a whole lexicon.
Well, you and I aren't going to use that one.
Well, I use the term occupation in referring to the rule of Israel over the Palestinians. I don't use occupation in relation to the land, because I don't believe that a Jew is an occupier in any part of the land, to coin a phrase, between the river and the sea. And a Jew is not an occupier in Judea. I'm not an occupier in Hebron. If anything, I belong in Hebron more than I do in Tel Aviv, in principle. In practice, I am occupying another people. And that's not an ideological statement. It's simply a matter of fact. Anyone who has served in the army, anyone who has served in Gaza, in the territories, and the territories is the easiest term to use. It's the most quasi-neutral. Although people on the right suspect that you're really a quasi-leftist if you're just kind of...
They would not tell you that was neutral if you're not calling it Judea and Samaria.
That's right. If you're not saying Judea and Samaria, I'm very comfortable with Judea and Samaria, and I'm comfortable with the West Bank. It's not an issue for me.
We have people on the show that have strong feelings, so I always like to ask.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
I want to ask you about a recent issue that took place, which is the death penalty that was mandated. So the Knesset passed a law mandating death penalty for West Bank Palestinians convicted of carrying out deadly terror attacks. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Look, I think that we need a serious national conversation about changing the ground rules of negotiating prisoner releases, because we find ourselves in this deeply destructive pattern of being held for ransom by Palestinian terrorists. So something has to change. And part of that conversation needs to be the question of the death penalty. Should there be a death penalty for terrorists? I deeply oppose this law, which, by the way, I don't think is racist, in the sense that if an Arab Israeli were to commit a lethal terror attack, this law does not apply to them. It's a law that applies to non-Israelis, to Palestinians with whom we are in a war.
And I just want to say that has been the wall-to-wall condemnation, is that it is an apartheid-type racist law because it only targets Palestinians.
Yeah, I don't think that's true, because, again, it doesn't target Palestinians who are citizens of Israel. But when you pass a law that says within 90 days of conviction, there must be a hanging, and there's no appeal, that's abhorrent. No appeal? What are we going to be hanging terrorists from cranes in Zion Square in Jerusalem? Who do we want to be? We're at war with a regime that does that. And while we're at war with Iran, you pass a law that is borrowed, at least in its spirit, from the Iranian regime. There's something monstrous about that. I don't oppose the law because it's racist. I oppose the law because it's evil. and that's a different category.
You've spoken a lot in this conversation about the need for Israel to be a country of law and order and to abide by it. So what would a serious, credible response from the state actually look like to address the violence that we're seeing in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria?
So look, first of all, Aviva, we're never going to be a country of order. This is an anarchic country of Jews. It's
Sorry, Jewish state. It's right. I was totally mistaken.
Jewish state and order do not go together, but we can and must be a country of law. And what this country needs to do, well, with each of our communities that exist outside the law, we need a very specific approach. With settlers who are looting and burning and occasionally murdering and stealing and killing livestock, the law is the law, and we need to start putting these people on trial and sending them to prison for very long terms. We need to resurrect what was once called the Jewish unit in the Shabak, in the Shin Bet, which monitored Jewish extremists before Netanyahu handed them the keys to the police department. The Jewish unit in the Shabak was in charge of monitoring the likes of Ben Gvir and other members of his Knesset faction, and we need to resurrect the Jewish section.
There's going to be an election in Israel this year, and it's looking at this moment that Netanyahu could very well be reelected, and we could be seeing more of the same in the coming years. So how would you make the case that you've just made to me, to your fellow Israelis, around the need to protect Israel's moral standing, both internally and abroad?
Well, first of all, I don't believe Netanyahu is going to be the next prime minister. I think, and if you look at all the polls, he doesn't have anywhere near the numbers, and if anything, he's in a downward momentum. But the question really is whether he'll be able to block the opposition from coming to power. Will Naftali Bennett be able to put together a coalition of 61? According to the most recent poll in Ma'ariv, Bennett has 61. But, this is a maddeningly close election. And the fact that it's close is itself maddening.
Yeah, the first election since October 7th that the guy who presided over it could return.
It's simply unthinkable to me that he even has a shot at it. So, but leaving that aside, the argument that I would make right now, and this is the only arguments I'm interested in at the moment to make to my fellow Israelis, are arguments that might help defeat Netanyahu. And the overriding argument needs to be that we are a deeply wounded and divided country. And the only way we're going to be able to begin the process of healing is if we move to a different leadership. And Naftali Bennett, if anything, is more right-wing than Netanyahu. Bennett is an authentic ideological right-winger. Netanyahu used to be a pragmatist, and now he's an opportunist, but he is not an ideological right-winger. And Bennett aims to put together what is in effect a national unity government that will exclude the ultra-Orthodox and Ben Gvir and the Arab parties, and try to recreate the Jewish majority that supports Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. That's the Bennett coalition. And that's the only coalition that can begin the process of healing Israel. And then we'll have to deal with the problems of the Haredim, of the Arab Israelis, outside the framework of the next coalition, because both of those groups, for different reasons, cannot be part of the next government. And so we need to start renegotiating the relationship between the Zionist mainstream and the Arab Israeli community on the one hand and the Haredi community on the other. But that can only be done when the Zionist mainstream is whole is healing itself. Now, there have always been deep disagreements in the Zionist mainstream, but we always agreed on the basic identity of the state as Jewish and democratic. This government, this terrible government, is the first to tear apart that minimal consensus over Israel as a liberal Jewish and democratic state, and liberal in the widest meaning of the term. Liberal, lowercase l, which includes uppercase liberals and conservatives. And that was always the broad coalition. And that was a coalition that the Likud, under Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Shamir, Ariel Sharon, and Netanyahu himself, until he started getting into trouble legally and declared war on the legal system, every leader of the Likud always positioned the party in this democratic Zionist liberal mainstream until this new iteration of Netanyahu. And Netanyahu has turned the Likud into an anti-democratic party. This is not the Likud. This is not the Likud we knew. And for me, the most destructive legacy of Netanyahu is what he's done to the political system and to Israeli society. That's where I find it hard to forgive him. And that's the argument that I would make to my fellow Israelis.
This is obviously a conversation that should go on for much, much longer, but we are out of time. Yossi, I always feel profoundly honored to be in your company and to get the chance to pick your brain. Thank you so much.
Aviva, wonderful to be with you. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you. That's a wrap on today's episode of Boundless Insights. Whether you've been with us from the start or are just discovering our show, we're so glad you're here. If today's conversation sparked a question, challenged your thinking, or made you shake your head, I want to hear from you. Email me at podcast@boundlessisrael.org. Your feedback gives us ideas for new topics and new guests. And if you believe these conversations matter, there are 3 ways to support the show. First, hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. Second, help us spread the word. Share an episode with friends and family, post about it, or mention it in a group chat. It really does make a difference. And third, consider supporting our work. Boundless is a nonprofit, and we rely on donors to keep the show going. You can make a gift at boundlessisrael.org/donate. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep the conversation going.